I must admit I didn't expect a room of this size. I expected a classroom of 15, but yeah, I'm glad to see so many faces. So yeah, as Max alluded to, I'm Mandeep. I have been at Titus Learning for around about 5 years or so now. My background is in the learning and development industry. I've worked in the industry for around about 10 years or so. And I've had the opportunity to work with hundreds of organisations in the delivery of learning management solutions, bespoke content development, as well as some consultancy projects too. Over to you, Martin.
Hi, I'm Martin Lidyard. So I work for JTL Training. I'm a customer of Titus's. My background's slightly different, so I've been in education for quite a number of years, actually more like 15 years, and I started that teaching in further education institutions. Moved out into apprenticeship training in about 2014 and worked for various organisations in that space, but predominantly digital industry organisations. JTL is very different to that. We focus on training electricians and plumbers, but essentially I moved over to JTL to actually bring those digital skills into the organisation.
Yeah, I just realised I did not give, thank you very much. I did not give an overview of Titus. Hopefully everybody in the room has heard of Titus Learning. We are the Global Moodle Partner of the Year 2024 and have been a Moodle partner for around about 8 years or so and Premium Moodle partner for the last 5 years in the time that I've been there. Great. So a little bit about the vision. Shall I hand this to you? You can use it.
I'll use this one. So I suppose the vision for JTL, or our corporate vision, is to be the training provider of choice to the industries that we serve. And that's really, really important to us. JTL was set up by the industry. So it was a combination of organisations such as Unite the Union, JIB, various different organisations, and we're a charity. So we're there to serve the industry. With that in mind, when I became the head of curriculum and digital learning at JTL, what became really important was to align my vision with the corporate one. So really what we started to do is we started to basically say, we want to create a digital learning platform that essentially is the choice for the industries that we serve. So it's aligned in that way. And what's really, really important to us in our digital transformation strategy, one thing that's absolutely critical is the partnerships that we develop with external organisations. And today we're going to tell you a little bit about the partnership that we have with Titus Learning and how that's helping us to move further and further towards meeting that vision. So, I think initially it's worth talking about where this all started. And when I joined JTL, we had a number of learning management systems. None of them were really fit for purpose. So we had to start looking at them. Why were they not meeting the organisational needs? And I think the first key thing to talk about is the fact that JTL is not just an apprenticeship training provider. It's a group of companies. JTL Apprenticeships is the apprenticeship training arm. We had a company called Develop, which focused on commercial training. And we also have an accreditation body known as Compex. And what they do, they certify people to be safe in explosive environments. So the type of thing you might see, it's training to be safe, say, on an oil rig. What we immediately realised before we started to look at what kind of solution we might need for this group of companies, we immediately realised that we had three very, very different audiences. So you've got apprentices, often younger learners. We had the idea of delegates, commercial people coming out from much larger organisations for training. And we had candidates that were geographically dispersed all over the world. So JTL, the apprenticeship type, England and Wales only, Develop, a bit more because it's UK based, but Compex operating on 6 continents and at least about 60 countries. So why did that matter to us? We needed to be able to find a solution where we could make it meet the needs of all of those independent audiences. And that's why multi-tenancy in whatever solution we chose was really, really important. So before we even approached Titus Learning, I think it's fair to say we'd already decided that Moodle Workplace was the product for us. At the time, we were working with nearly 90 different further education colleges around the country. We were doing subcontracting with those organisations. And through the research that we carried out, actually, roughly 65% of those colleges were already using a Moodle-based product. So with that in mind, the multi-tenancy, the prior experience, we knew that Moodle was going to be a product for us.
The process. Really interesting. I still remember to this day the first meeting that we had on Zoom, July 2021. And I remember leaving that call thinking, God, this guy knows his stuff. So deep down, I was thinking, right, I need to bring everything here in my A game to really support these guys in terms of what that process is going to look like and how we can put ourselves front and centre in terms of supporting JTL with their needs. And I think that really started out through a consultancy project. So actually, before we even got to the procurement side of things and the kind of the formal RFPs and RFIs that came, it was very much, okay, let's sit back and let's fully understand your needs and your requirements. And that started through that kind of consultancy phase. A number of days, we spent time with Martin and the team. Delika over there spent a lot of time with Martin to begin with in terms of padding out the requirements and understanding their needs in more detail. And ultimately what that led us to is providing Martin and the team at JTL with documentation, which really then helped them form the RFP process and what that looked like.
I think it's fair to say that those requirements were pretty extensive, and I think you all had quite a lot of patience as we were going through that phase.
Yeah, these things take time, right? It's all about making sure that we are supporting the organisation to begin with, and then actually, in terms of forming that partnership, we'll go on to kind of the process that we've been through and what the partnership has led to shortly. But ultimately, after that consultancy phase, we spent time responding to formal processes. There was, a number of providers in the hat. And ultimately, I guess it came down to, us understanding their needs in a more structured fashion and then being able to showcase what the art of the possible really was. And then, I guess I'll pass to you around the procurement scoring and the contract award phase.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's fair to say we might have been as extensive as 500 requirements we had listed. It was probably overkill. I mean, a lot of people were involved. We documented everything. We wanted to really, really understand how Moodle Workplace could shift things within our organisation and support processes. So we really, really did go into detail. But I think what's really important to note and why ultimately we had so much faith in Titus at this point, it was the detail that they provided in response. So where we were going through that scoring element, it wasn't just a case of saying, oh yes, we can do this. It was, yes, and this is how we will achieve it. This is how we will do it within Moodle Workplace. So we had absolute confidence in the abilities of the people within that organisation to deliver on what we required. So of course, we got to the point where Titus was awarded the contract. That's years ago now. Where are we at?
I think that process...
We're year 4, I think.
Yeah, that process took a year. So from that initial meeting all the way through to getting to the point where contract was awarded, it was a slog. As Martin's already alluded to, we had to respond to requirements in detail, which I think is always the right thing to do, and really showcase how our team was going to support the implementation of Moodle Workplace and, ultimately meet your needs.
And I think that was it. It was building business cases, understanding how we would get return on investment for what we were going to put forward, and essentially convincing, a team of executives that this was the right move for JTL as an organisation, because it'd been down so many roads where it not really worked out. It might have been one LMS where, I don't know, you couldn't brand it in the way you wanted to do it, or one that wasn't feature-rich enough. And actually, if I think back to that time, one of the execs commented, and he kind of said, but isn't Moodle kind of old and clunky? And my response to that was, no, Moodle's flexible, and it can be whatever you want it to be. So I think it's just probably breaking down those barriers, the misunderstandings, and actually, what you said, it's the art of the possible, what you can actually do.
And that's why Martin's hand shot up earlier when Scott said flexibility and customizability.
It's true, it did.
Yeah, so in terms of enabling change, the content management streamlining piece, I'm going to hand over to you for you to deal with that one, and then we'll get into the others. Yeah,
no problem. So I think there's multiple ways that I suppose it helps us to streamline. But one example I could give you, specifically in Moodle Workplace, is the use of the shared space. So what we have, I mentioned Compex, this accreditation body. They've got a program called Compex Essentials. What's really, really common is for a JTL apprentice to finish their apprenticeship program, but progress into one of our other organisations. So it might have been developed where they go on to be a commercial delegate, or it might be that they become a candidate in Compex. What this means is that we can start to instil knowledge from other organisations early doors. So by that streamlining, it means that access to Compex Essentials is available for our apprentice learners before they actually complete the apprenticeship. Our staff might utilise it for CPD. It just allows us to streamline without having to have multiple versions for different audiences. I think that's the point we're getting at really there. But the second point's also really important, and we're talking about curriculum standardisation and reducing really the dependency on resource development. So I suppose what do we mean by that? As an organisation, at the moment we've got about 15 training centres across the UK. Now, a difficulty you've got when you've got 15 training centres in different locations is that teaching practitioners do things the way they like to do it. You know, people have their own habits, they have their own techniques, they have their own resources. But it's no good for us as an organisation from a quality assurance perspective if we've got one learner getting one experience in our Orpington training centre and then they're getting an entirely different experience in our Carlisle centre. So what we're talking about here, we're talking about how actually Moodle Workplace supports that curriculum standardisation process. It ensures consistency in the delivery of materials, and it ensures that people are getting the same experience regardless of where they are in the country. It's also enabled new pedagogical approaches for us as an organisation, and we'll start to talk about those in a little bit more detail in the forthcoming slides. First-time success rates as well, okay? One of the things that's a real problem for somebody training to be an electrician, it's the endpoint assessment. Take the analogy of your driving test, okay? If you get a major fault, you fail your test, right? And fairly so, because if it's a major fault, you know, it might be that it's something that's unsafe. If you get a minor fault, you might be able to get multiple minor faults. That's kind of okay. You know, you might get away with that because it's not necessarily unsafe. When you're training as an electrician, the end point is very, very similar to that, okay? You get one major thing wrong, you've got to resit that. And across the UK, notoriously, first-time success rates for electricians qualifying for apprenticeship routes are actually quite low. Now, what we did, we put a model in place to seek to improve that first-time success rate, and it's a blended model where you bring in online learning and support as well as that practice in a workshop. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the forthcoming slides. And then, of course, the final point we've got there, supporting of new teaching practitioners. The average person that comes to teach an electrical apprentice within our organisation is somebody that's out of the trade. So they've not necessarily come from a teaching background, they're more likely to be an ex-electrician or an ex-plumber. And what we do is we provide them with all of the courses necessary to qualify them as a teacher. What that does mean, though, is it's quite a big jump from being somebody in a trade moving into being a teaching practitioner. What this does is it helps to support them with that onboarding element. So what we've got here is a couple of examples. So I mentioned this first-time success rate element. And what we did, we pulled a delivery model. It's really quite commonly used. It's not, you know, it's not world-beating. It's quite simple. It's one that's still used by the British military. It's used to train very practical subjects. So the things that you might see, I don't know, stripping a rifle in the British Army, that's the model that would be used to teach and train people to do that. And it's just an acronym that stands for explain, imitate, demonstrate, and practice. What we did, we split it in half, knowing that we can explain and demonstrate something in terms of electrical practice online. So we went out to a training centre, we actually set up an entire room where this could be almost a simulated environment, essentially, for what this endpoint assessment would look like. We filmed JTL tutors actually carrying out the activities to give that explanation and demonstration at the same time. But for those of you that do work with vocational subjects, what you will know is it can't all be done online. You know, you cannot train as an electrician in a fully digital way. So that's where you've got the imitation and practice following that element. We did see, within the first 12 months of launching this, roughly a 5% uplift in that first-time success rate by actually implementing that blended model. But we're kind of not stopping there now, I suppose. It's where do we go next with it, how can we get more out of it, and how can we go further by utilising Moodle Workplace to meet learners' needs. So many of you might be familiar with the Edgar Dale cone of experience, or you might know it as the learning pyramid or the retention pyramid. We've started to look at the layers of that pyramid, and we'll go through that in much more detail on the next slide. What we really want to sort of highlight to everybody is how does Moodle Workplace facilitate retention at all of those layers, and actually what kind of features can we bring in that support each of those areas. Oops. So, just quick show of hands before we carry on. How many people have seen this model before in the room? What have we got from? So
a few.
About 10-20% maybe. Essentially what this means, so this learning pyramid, it's about how information is retained based upon the style, the methodology, the mode of teaching and learning. And what it talks about some of them being passive methods and some of them being active methods of learning. The idea is after a 48-hour period, you want people to retain as much information as they possibly can. And of course, by being able to retain that information, you have a greater chance of first-time success when it comes to any form of assessment. If we look to the top of the pyramid, so we've got lecturing, and that's quite low, that's like 5% retention. And we get that through classroom sessions, or we might get it through sometimes in the online format where information is just being delivered in a video. Of course, we get reading. Text-based information in Moodle Workplace, there might be books, there might be physical books. Actually, JTL has a publication, and we're currently looking at how we turn that publication into a digital format. You're still in that passive mode, though, when we've got audio-visual. So we're bringing in things like video content, we might have voiceovers embedded within Moodle Workplace, and we're referring to UserWay, the plugin there. That's something that really supports accessibility, but also gives that auditory element.
Quick question. Has anybody used UserWay in the room? Anybody heard of it? Okay, few people.
It might be worth just giving a bit of an overview of what that is. Great
tool, very much centred around kind of being an additional widget on any kind of any platform, any website. And ultimately it is then allowing learners to be able to choose based on their accessibility needs, how they wish the platform to display or the website, whatever it might be, how it displays, if they've got specific needs around kind of contrast or bigger spacing requirements, all of that can be adjusted based on a per learner basis. It also includes a translation widget. So I think there's around about 35 to 40 languages on there at the moment. So for the languages on there, again, it won't translate things like SCORM, but platform-based, any text inputted into the system or the platform, it will amend based on a learner's needs. So fantastic tool. Anybody wants to hear a little bit more, go away and have a look, or come and grab me after. I'm more than happy to have a chat with you about that.
Yeah, great. In fact, also it's worth, whilst you're just talking about that, mentioning we have an additional learning needs team at JTL, and actually they're already seeing the impact after a few short months of having that in place. So they're already seeing how that benefits learners. So I think we're coming towards the end of that passive element. So we're talking here now about audio, visual, and explanation and demonstration. So we're now at that 30% mark. So, you know, audio visual's great, but it doesn't get us all the way to that higher retention level. What you'll notice the difference, you'll notice the difference between passive and active learning is that actually people become more and more involved with either something that's experience or with each other once you go beyond that 30% mark. So we're at the point at 50% where people start to discuss. And actually, there's lots of ways in Moodle that we can get people to discuss. You know, native features within Moodle enable that. But actually, one of the things we're doing is using Padlet via LTI integration. And what that brings for us is AI-moderated discussion forums, enabling learners to collaborate and communicate directly through Moodle Workplace. Stage further, they start to learn more by practice by doing. So what you'll see now, you'll start to see that there's an overlap between that EDIP model and this learning pyramid. So what kind of things might we see where they're practicing by doing in the digital space? Simulations, virtual environments, VR experiences, branch learning. So all of these modes of learning are being employed within our LMS. And then finally, where you get to the gold standard with active, you're getting to the point where really you're building communities. And that's where we're going next. So we've got this concept that we're referring to as collab. And collab is simply a term that we're using that combines cooperative and collaborative learning. There's an American psychologist called Dr. Spencer Kagan, and he came out with a number of theories years ago about cooperative learning and structured ways of doing that. It's slightly old hat, but the principles remain the same, and it's something I learned about when I was doing teacher training. It forces accountability, it forces people into that situation where they are involved. So if you think about where you might have been in a classroom in the past, it might be that a teacher poses a question, they might turn around and say, can anybody tell me the answer to this? And what happens is the same hand keeps going up again and again and again. And what that actually does, it doesn't build community, it creates division in a classroom, okay? What cooperative learning structures do is it turns the classroom into a more team-oriented approach. So you might have a mixture of ability from low, you might have medium low, medium high, high ability learners. What you end up with is mixed ability teams, okay? So the distance between one and the other, they're not too far away from each other. The high ability learner can support the medium to high, but for the high ability learner, you wouldn't put them directly next to the low ability learner, if that makes sense. Where this is going, I suppose, this collab idea, it's going to provide structures for the classroom, okay, so it's going to support teachers, and all of these structures would be available through Moodle Workplace. But also, what it will do, it'll have an area that will be branded under this collab agenda that enables learners to collaborate. So it might be question time, it might be ask the expert, liaise with one of the JTL tutors, it might be employer forums, it might be the idea that we get industry advisors into the platform where they can actually give guidance directly to apprentices. It's about building communities because people learn from people. And what research shows you is that actually the best way of getting retention is to provide that peer learning opportunity. Okay.
Partnership. So as I mentioned, it's we've been working together we're going into year 4 now of our partnership. The solution is very much different to what it was when we first signed off on the agreement.
Yeah.
We've been agile, it's been evolving. Things have changed and shifted as Moodle has shifted over that time. whether it's version upgrades, whether it's products that we have developed and continue to deliver. We've developed an industry-leading theme for Moodle, not going to spoil it, but on the next slide we'll see something else that we've developed to further enhance the user experience and the interface of Moodle and Moodle Workplace. Over the years we've done a lot of work together. Things have shifted, things have changed.
I think one example we could give. We talked about us being a group of companies, and we talked about that commercial arm developed training. At the time, what we needed an e-commerce solution. We no longer require that e-commerce solution because we sold the commercial arm. And really, that's about how, in the partnership, I suppose, is that Titus has been able to adapt to the needs of us as a customer and change and move with what we require, and scale back or move forward as is necessary to meet the ongoing changing needs.
Yeah, I think it's probably key to highlight as well. We've learned a hell of a lot in 3 years, and I think in the way that we approach working with the organisations that we work with, we're very agile, very partnership focused. So everything is centred around the way that, in this instance, JTL have needed to adapt and have a changing environment for their needs. And that's just something that we kind of, I guess, pride ourselves on at Titus. This is not me plugging Titus, by the way. But yeah. Cool. And then next slide. So as an organisation, we are very much driven on unique product development. We understand that we have the ability to be able to adapt and support a better user experience. And I think alongside our theme, what we have also developed is an enhanced course format. Very much, if I'm being completely honest, and it stays in this room, even though the session's being recorded, it was born out of frustration, for definite. We've seen a lack of, we wanted to align the user experience within a course alongside the theme that we have developed as well, which has led to us developing an enhanced course format, very much supporting full search functionality, quick shortcuts, an approach which allows for a user to see the estimated time to complete. Very much tile-driven in its navigation. It's been co-invested in terms of by our clients for us to develop it, and it's now something that we are kind of taking to market as such and supporting our clients with that better user experience. And who better to ask firsthand but Martin about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for me, this has been an absolute success, this course format. And I think one thing that you just mentioned there is the developed out of frustration piece. And I think what's probably really important to talk about in terms of the partnership we have with Titus, or maybe even the partnership Titus has with all of its customers. An event in London, was it, about 12 months ago?
A little bit less. About 10 months. 12,
okay. So there's an event in London. A range of your customers came together. There was feedback forums. And actually, this was born out of that feedback forum. It's customers actually turning around and saying, this really frustrates me. This is clunky. What can we do about it? Now, from my perspective as the person that's basically signing off to say, yeah, let's co-invest, that's brilliant for me. Because collectively, we all have the same problem. And if we can co-invest with a premium, through a premium partner with other people where there's a shared problem, everybody gets the solution that they need at a really economical and value-driven price point. So I suppose to tell you a little bit more then about this course format, I've probably been using Moodle for around 15 years. So I've seen it from when I've been working in further education and various apprenticeship training organisations. This is the best course format I've come across for Moodle. It's by far the best one I've seen, and I've tried most of them. But what's really, really important, and I think the message that's worth getting across, it's great now, and we're on version 1. It's the first version. But this, I suppose, highlights why it's really, really good to work with a premium partner, because actually this is now a product that will continue to evolve. It will continue to get feedback coming in from customers, and actually it'll be driven by customer need. So actually this is only going to get better and better over time. So yeah, again, really, really happy with the way that's going. In terms of how we'll now use it though, it's game changing in some respects, because we want to improve the user interface for our learners. And actually, this is so good that we can actually almost use it like a menu system. There's features where you can turn off indexes, you can get rid of the first element, the general element within the course. And actually, you can create sub-courses within what's essentially like an umbrella course. That's great from the perspective of getting all of the data into one place. So I suppose to give that some context and how we might be using it, we've got an agenda at JTL called Steps to Success, and it's all about personal development as opposed to the professional side. And it focuses on a number of pillars, and it might be health and well-being, or staying safe, or I don't know, career development, for example. So all of the wider personal development needs that the average apprentice, young person, delegate may require. What this allows us to essentially do is have one master course for Steps to Success, 100 sub-courses, creating a menu for how that works, but also at that point, being able to report in one course with all of that data coming through into the same place. So it's really, really powerful. We're already taking it at this stage, a couple of months in maybe now? Yeah. We're already taking it probably beyond what its original intended purpose was. We're already seeing ways that we can exploit and use it to our advantage. And again, it's a journey. It will carry on, the development, the feedback, and it'll just become better and better.
And there's a lot more to come. No pressure, Steve. So I guess just some key takeaways from today's session. Hopefully this has all come across anyway, but yeah, the kind of the 3 Ps that we always allude to, I guess, when we meet: that process, the platform, and the partnership. And then kind of, hopefully that's a model that you can take away today and adopt with partners that you're working with at the moment. I guess the vision, the industry awareness, the pedagogical clarity that Martin alluded to earlier on in the presentation, it is as important as the technology. We are supporting from a technology standpoint and aiding JTL in what they're trying to get to, but without the pedagogical clarity, it wouldn't be where it is today. Yeah, the building peer learning and community as early as possible. The last point I think is the most powerful thing that anybody can take away, that everybody should take away today, that don't underestimate that power of collaboration, whether it's internal, whether it's with the technology partners that you're working with. That should be a kind of a staple in the work that everybody's doing.
I think that's a really important point that you're sort of finishing on that slide, really. We don't perceive Titus as just a partner. It's almost an extension of our own organisation. Everybody within our team, within my own team, engages with Titus. Titus engage back. It really is our line of support. We have a relatively small curriculum and digital team within our organisation, and a limited amount of expertise. But actually what Titus does, it opens up the expertise to a much greater level. So we really do view the partnership in that way.
Thanks. I'll take all the credit. Open up the floor. I'll run round with the mic for anybody that has any questions.
Happy to answer anything that anyone wants us to talk about.
That was a really lovely presentation, lads. Very interesting because Sheila and I both, as you know, we were talking earlier, we both work in apprenticeships as well. Listening to the way you've your courses and that laid out, sounds very similar to the way we would lay ours out, and it is definitely the way to go, because we would have done it that way too. I'm curious about the way you spoke about your summative assessment there. That's one big assessment. The way we would do it is we have ongoing assessments for each module and then capstone. Is there any way, like, how many years is in your apprenticeship altogether?
So I think actually, just to add clarity, it is very similar to what you've just explained. An electrical apprenticeship at JTL spans 4 years. We obviously try and get them through Gateway sooner than that. You know, we try and get that done earlier in our curriculum plan. Does allow for that. But when you're talking about modular and summative assessment, we do assess, we mock assess at the end of each. So actually, if I was to go into the core curriculum and how that works for us in Moodle Workplace, because we've only touched on certain subjects here, but if we talk about core curriculum, we actually use the programs feature in Moodle Workplace. So what we do, we start by having a pre-knowledge check. So we're checking the understanding before they even come into the centre. That gives the tutor a starting point and an understanding, an ability to differentiate for the people that they've got within that group. At that point, they have access to the content, the materials, and if it's a modular exam at the end, they'll have mock assessments to test their understanding, and then, of course, final summative assessment with the actual exam. But yeah, that's built into every module, and every module in our core curriculum, we're using the programs feature to facilitate it in Moodle Workplace.
So you mentioned earlier on that prior to you coming on board, there would have been only a 5% pass rate for the first time attempt at the final exam, no?
No, there wasn't a 5% pass rate. What I'm saying is, until we put that EDIP model in place, until we started to bring in that intervention where you had a truly blended learning model, actually, the success rates nationally, and I think you've said
they rose by 5%.
They went up by 5% within a 12-month period.
Yeah, which is quite high, actually.
It's quite significant.
It
is.
Especially if you're talking about hundreds of apprentices, which there are.
Well, in our situation, and I probably didn't add clarity to that in terms of JTL, but we at any given point have about 8,000 apprentices across electrical and plumbing. So we're the largest provider in the UK for electrical.
Fair play to you. Yeah. Very good.
Any other questions? And if not, I promise we'll shut up and get off stage.
But equally, we're happy to answer them if there is any.
Oh, it's for the so we get the TV coverage. Oh. Sorry.
Martin, in terms of assessments being done, what type of assessments would be done on Moodle versus in the classroom? Just trying to get a better understanding of that.
So I think in terms of assessments, more often than not, it's modular-based assessments, it's summative assessments like we've just spoken about. Lots of the modules on the apprenticeship are assessed via MCQ, multiple choice questions. But actually, the kind of thing that's done in the classroom, it's practical assessment. So what this allows us to do, the ability to have Moodle Workplace in there for us, we've almost got a flipped rotational classroom model at this point. And what that means basically for the classroom-based assessment, it means that the focus becomes practical skills as opposed to theory. And actually, the digital element supports faster progress with the theoretical elements of those apprenticeships. Hopefully that answers your question.
Cool. Any other questions? I've got one in the middle.
Sorry, just in the interest of collaboration, do you collaborate with your employers at all, and what kind of feedback did they provide into your system, and what changes have you made based on employer impact and feedback?
Sorry, could you just repeat the question for us? Didn't quite catch the last end of it.
Sorry, it's just about the feedback. If you're In terms of collaboration, are you collaborating with your employers on the work-based learning, and are they feeding into your model, and have you made any changes based on the feedback that you've received from your employers, or is it very much you pushing it out and you're not collaborating with them?
No, I think, look, if you're in apprenticeship training, you've got to collaborate with the employers. And I think that varies from one apprenticeship training provider to the next. The last provider I worked for was a digital industry provider. And what you'd find with your employers in that provider is 80% of your employers might have been levy-paying customers. Now, in a way, that's easier to get them involved than the situation we have at JTL. So, your levy-paying customers, it's your household names we're talking about. At JTL, it's not like that. It's the opposite way around. 80% of our employers are micro businesses. They're usually 5 people or less, 80% of them. So we actually have 3,000 employers. Now, of course, we do things like employer feedback forums. We get information in from the employers. We start to understand, actually, is this meeting their needs? But one missing piece for us, and it's definitely on the agenda, is actually for all of our employers to have access to the LMS. And this is where, the bit we talked about at the end, the collab element, the collaboration piece, pulling people together and the peer learning opportunity, that's where the employers start to fit into the picture more so. Because what that'll do is, if you imagine you've got the collective minds of 3,000 industry experts across the country, if we can get them to collaborate in one space, that'll become really, really powerful. Hopefully that answers that one for you.
Any last questions? No? Excellent. Well, thank you all very much. Appreciate you coming along. And if you do have any questions, Martin and I are hanging around down at the bottom for the next 5 minutes or so. Thank you.
I'll also be here for the remainder of the conference till Thursday, so please feel free to come and talk to us if you wish to do so. Thank you.